All right, Mark Deering here from Remax. We have a special one for you today. We are with EverSource Wealth Advisors, and we've got Tyler and Shawn. Tyler's been a long-term friend of mine and just met Shawn today, but heard a lot about you. What we're going to do today is talk a little bit about wealth management, not necessarily investments and how can I turn $1 into 10, those types of things. But we're going to just talk about wealth management in particular. I got a chance to talk with these guys off camera a little bit. I think you're going to have some great stuff that you're going to hear here. But before we get started in any of that, let's hear a little bit about each of your backgrounds and what got you into financial planning and how did you end up in this situation?
Yeah. So, growing up, I grew up with my dad and brother, and my family didn't really do well in the financial space, right? And managing money, and I didn't really know at that time that was going to play a pretty big role in my life. And so just kind of grew up, originally, like most kids, thought I was going to be a doctor,
Sure.
And then as I got into that detail, I was like, oh no, I don't want to be a doctor, and you don't want me to be a doctor. So, but really, as I got closer to college, I actually was thinking about becoming an architect. And I really liked buildings, and I liked, cities and stuff. But, as I started to go along, I had life kind of give me a little bit of a detour, and I ended up in Chicago. And when I got to Chicago, obviously big city, lots of finance, I started my path down there. And originally, like most people, said, well, maybe I'll just do, undergrad in just business, right? And I was like, I think I want to go a little bit more specific. And so the school I went to, North Park University, is on the north side of Chicago. They offered a finance degree. And so got to dive into that. And I also played soccer while I was there at college. And one of the guys I played soccer with ultimately got me my first job. And so when I graduated, it was Bank One, which ultimately got bought out by JP Morgan, but basically got me an intro into the business. We were on the commercial side, so like trading desk, marketing, some of the collateral spaces, and so dealing with institutions. And ultimately, that's where I would get my license to be able to get into this business. But I had a cousin, and he worked in Florida, and him and I would talk back and forth. And I was telling him, I like finance, but I think I really want to help people. Dealing with traders and institutions just really wasn't. I didn't really wasn't passionate about it. And so he's like, hey, well, I think you should come down and meet the owner of my firm. And so, long story short, I go down there, I get my opportunity. This was back in, late 06. But I'd already been licensed for a couple of years. So, that was kind of my intro. And then through these last couple decades, just was really passionate about wanting to help people. I don't think it's a given that you wake up one day and you know how to do this. I would even tell you, like, my finance degree didn't tell me how to do what we do. It was a lot of theory, and there's just a lot of practical ways. If people could learn these different methods, I think it really could, put them in a really good spot.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like the way you're touching there, and I'm going to ask some more questions on that, because there's, same thing. I grew up with, potentially a family that was thinking paycheck to paycheck, and thankfully along the way, I met some people who kind of took me under their wing, taught me some things, and learned also the hard way on a few things.
For sure. Yeah.
I think all of us probably have. Yeah. But that's what I love about, what we were talking about earlier, and we'll get more into that. Mm-hmm. But Tyler, you and I have had known each other now for some time. Yep. We have a mountain bike background, and so tell us about your passion and what got you involved.
I guess to come full circle, what I've realized is I like helping people, which started out, I went to college locally in town here. I got a finance degree. Same thing Shawn's talking about. It's like, okay, now what do I do with this? I went a couple different directions. I managed the bike shop for 8 years. I love
me into a lot of bikes.
Me too. At the end of the day, what I realized that I liked about that job was helping people get out and ride, helping people come up with solutions. And actually, to come full circle, Shawn and I met 10 years ago, and I always kind of knew what he did. And then actually, Lindsay and I became Shawn's client.
Okay.
And then it was kind of this like, okay, I went to, in school, all my electives, I took financial planning classes. It's just kind of a interesting, hard career to get into. And I didn't feel like I ever really had the right opportunity. And then I mentioned it to Shawn in passing when he told me that he wanted to open an office up in Grand Rapids. That's what I went to school for. And he didn't know if I was being serious or not. So we met up for breakfast the next day. And, honestly, it was a total God thing. Like, he threw it out there, I threw it out there, and it just turned into,
That's
hey,
awesome.
we kind of have a lot of similarities. We have a similar vision on how we want to treat people.
Sure.
And we both have a passion for helping people. So that's kind of where I've landed. And, I absolutely love what we get to do.
Yeah. We were talking earlier, good people know good people, and all of us are in this, have this mindset of abundance, and we have this, hey, let's serve, let's serve. And yes, it's nice at the end of the day if it fuels our business, but we kind of all have this servant mentality, and we were talking about stewardship earlier and different things like that. And that's why, Tyler and I can go to breakfast and 2 hours goes by and we're like, oh, we better get going. So let's talk a little bit about that. I know we have some strict things that you can't talk about, the finance investment side, which we're not looking to do anyway. Yeah. But what does it look like to work with you guys? And it's mostly planning. Let's focus on that. Like, what's the planning side?
Yeah. So, I would say, we were talking a little about this off camera. A lot of times people will come to us, more importantly, to figure out, can I retire? Do I have enough money? Right. And we have just found that there are a lot of other questions that need to be asked. And so, some being like, ultimately, who's going to take care of the kids if mom or dad don't wake up tomorrow, right? That's
Tough
important, right?
Yeah.
Or God forbid, if both parents don't wake up, who's going to take care of the kids? And what we've found is that a lot of times these are tough questions because we have to figure out answers, and then we have to figure out answers to those answers if something else changes, right? But if you do the work, I believe on the other side is peace, is financial peace. And I think that's ultimately is the goal, is trying to get people to, as much as we can, right? I guess behind the word planning, right? As much as we can plan what could happen, right? But putting in a lot of contingencies and making sure that we've identified and answered questions, and I'll just give a personal example of, I went through this with my brother. He passed away unexpectedly, and I had no idea what he wanted, And I think that, as we have these life events that happen, I think for Tyler and I, we want to inform the people we get to work with, the people we get to meet about these things, because it is so important. And yet we put it off because we think we have time.
Sure.
It can go smoother. It can, there are a lot of pieces that can happen if we're willing to invest in the time. And so there's some key areas that we for sure like to cover. Another one that I think about is, that's a hot topic that can be is, does mom and dad have things in order, right? And ultimately, that's kind of a question for us as we get older too, because we're going to be asked that at some point, right?
Right.
And that can get overlooked because, depending on the family dynamic, are we going to be responsible for helping mom and dad? Does mom and dad have everything in order? If not, it's going to be chaos,
right?
And it doesn't need to be,
Sure.
And so we'll encourage that, So a lot of times when we meet our younger clients and we ask that question, it's not really geared towards them because we're not going to have that question really for them for many years. But it's really to try and encourage that question with their parents, and it's not to get into the details of what does mom and dad have. Right. It's more about, we just want to make sure you guys have thought about it, and we also, more importantly, we want to be able to carry out your wishes.
Absolutely. I have. Both my parents have passed in the last 4 years, and it was a shocker for our family, and we had some ups and downs and like what to do and all of those things, and we weren't planned for it. So I can really appreciate the thought of financial, basically a planner to to not just, hey, how's the stocks doing, but hey, what are you going to do if this happens, or let's prepare you for this. And like you said, also peace of mind. We're all looking for, there's the fear of the unknown is the big thing that's out there. And if there's a fear of the unknown, but you guys can take a few of those pieces out, sleep better at night, just have a plan, And if one thing I have learned in my 27 years in real estate and running, being an entrepreneur is hire the professionals. CPAs, the financial people, the photographers, as you saw today.
You did a great job.
But hire the professional. You might think, can I afford it? Do I have enough to even talk about, financially? Do I even need to? I'd assume the answer is yes. There's no such thing as, you need to show up with 100,000 for us to talk about. Maybe talk on that a little bit. Shouldn't everybody be talking to you guys just about?
I think, I'll give a quick analogy to what you were just saying, working with professionals. I like to give this one. It's like, you don't wake up one day and like, man, where'd those 6-packs come from?
Yeah.
I didn't do anything, but they just showed up, right?
No.
Oh, you didn't share your secret.
Right.
But it is true. I think, it's all about results, right? It's all about, are you aligned with people in your life? And it doesn't just have to be with finance. Are you in line with people in your life to get you to where you want to be? And I think for a lot of us, we want to have impact, right? We want to make a difference. We want to be generous. We want to not have to worry. And we think, if you find the right relationship where someone is invested in trying to get you to your goals and think through some things that could derail it, I think it gives you a great opportunity to potentially reach those goals. For us, it's, trust is big, like we have to be transparent on both sides because if the advice is only going to be as good as what you're willing to share.
Sure.
And so, as we start the process in the very beginning, we want honesty, and what we would be hoping for is a long-term relationship. Not just with the clients themselves, but we hope the next generation and then the generation after that. Right?
Absolutely.
Because we think it's just so important. You worked so hard, you want to make sure that it's impacting the generations to come. So,
and go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say the other, big thing that Shawn has instilled in me, and I'm still learning.
Sure.
It's a process, but we want to make impact in people's lives, not just invest their money.
Sure.
If someone comes to us and says, hey, I have $1 million to invest with you, that sounds great. But if, they have $10 million with another advisor and money with somebody else, and we're not really doing anything to change their life, that's not really the person that we want to help. We want to help the person that we're answering those questions, giving them that peace of mind that they can sleep better at night. They know their future's kind of not planned, but they have a guardrails up.
Sure.
So that's been a learning curve, right? Or especially for me being earlier on, I'm almost 3 years in now, where, you want to collect assets, but at the same time, I think more our purpose and calling is to actually impact life.
Totally can relate with that in real estate. The fact that we get to do real estate with all of these people, and it sounds weird to say it's almost secondary because it's good to feel that way where you're just here to help this person. Oh, your aunt died and you need to sell a place. Well, not your relative, didn't pass, but there's a family scenario. Hey, Mark, can you help out? You refer, she's in great hands. That everything's going to be taken care of, and I care. I care highly about her, not just because I would have anyways without it being a referral, but I take extra care and this is family. We got to make sure that, have you thought of this? Make sure we this. So I think when you find a network of people who care about the people they're dealing with, they have always growing, always learning. We share different audio books all the time of what are you listening to? What are you getting into? There's just so much that can be learned from that. And I think it's key when you meet people like you guys, it's more of, and we try to do the same thing in real estate, it's more of a relationship than it is a transaction.
Yeah.
And that relationship is, way more valuable than, all the little things. Do you guys probably find the same thing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think too, it's easy, the buzzword, to say financial planning, and that can encompass a lot of things. And there's just people that just don't do that. And that's okay. But that's where I always encourage people, like, just know the relationship you're getting into, and know what they're going to do or what they're not going to do. Because it's not, everyone isn't alike, they're definitely, and sometimes, I think, I don't know if it comes in your business too much, but in our business, sometimes cost, right? Like what does it cost for you? And sometimes people can be really focused on, like, I need to get the cheapest cost. Well, sometimes cheaper is just cheaper.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the better outcome.
You get what you pay for.
You get what you pay for. And so, in today's world too, like, we are very regulated. Most things are very transparent. So, like, if you don't have the information, if you're working with someone, you don't have the information, you should be able to get it because it's required of us to give it. But, I think at the end of the day too, like, do you feel like the person really has your vested interest, or is the advice, and especially these days we're under, the fiduciary rule is, we have to put the client first, above us, and so, as you're interacting with your person, do you feel that, right?
Sure.
Do you feel that connection? Do they know you? Do they know your family? Do they seem to, be available too, right?
Sure.
So I think that's important. The other thing I would say too is I see this from time to time too on the flip side, where someone has been working with someone for quite some time. We talk about honesty and transparency. We're all going to retire one day, right? That's the goal, right?
Hopefully.
With the right plan, right?
Right. Yes.
But too many times I hear these stories about, well, I used to work with someone and I think he or she's still there, but I don't ever see them. They're not in my meeting anymore. And maybe there again, we talk about, everyone wants to run practices differently, but for us, and this has been, our commitment to I'm going to be in your meeting, or I'm going to be for sure part of it some way, shape or form, even as we continue to grow. Because we were talking about this before, it's a relationship business.
Yes. Yeah.
And so sometimes I just see, and I know change is hard. No one wants to change.
Sure.
But I think sometimes there is a lot of fruit if you're willing to not accept, mediocrity.
Sure.
And again, if someone's not being transparent, or you're coming into a meeting, all of a sudden you have new team members that you don't typically work with, and you don't know anything about it. Well, maybe it is time for a second opinion.
Sure.
Because most people are paying good money. And I think this all works on trust and transparency.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can relate on a lot of different levels with that. And even I'm thinking of my my insurance salesman for vehicles.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between going out to lunch with him, how's things going, you're hearing about what so that place we're insuring, what is that place all about? And him knowing, the ins and outs of that, so there's back to that relationship, back to I can call him when I'm going to make a van purchase, and say, what does this look like? And I will say, I think to the public, don't be afraid or nervous to reach out and start some of those relationships. You don't have to just be super well connected. Right. Have the courage to get out and ask us. We can connect you with people like these guys. Reach out to us. We can connect you with an amazing auto insurance person or landscapers and different people like that. It is nice to have a big network of people.
Sure.
And obviously we have a big network of people that we know, like, and trust. And I think that's a big thing that might be a big stumbling block for somebody who's not as social as us. They might like Google something or whatever, but ask one of your friends, ask us, get connected. Don't be afraid to take that step.
Yeah. And we say too, especially if, someone's newly entering into this world of, maybe seeking an advisor or planner, interview a few people, right? I mean, because at the end of the day, I think your gut's going to tell you, and is this a person, or is this team, could I really trust? Do they feel like they really care about me? And listen to that. Like, so many times, and I've heard before too, is like, we might see someone after they maybe decided to, we didn't meet them before, but they said, we really just didn't feel right, but we decided to still go with them. Like, well, your gut was telling you something. The other thing you hit on too, Mark, is that you talked about getting started. So we do come across some people that either are getting started late in life, right? And like anything, life happens. Maybe you get married, you have kids, and your jobs move you across the country, and one day you wake up and you're 50. And maybe, maybe you've started something with your employer and or maybe you have multiple plans out there that, you just really haven't had time to consolidate. The big thing is get started.
Sure.
We can't do anything about the past, but we can do something about the future.
Sure.
And so that would be my encouragement to people out there that maybe, retirement's kind of out there and they're like, oh man, like I can't believe I'm maybe 10 years away, right?
Sure.
And
sure.
what to do. Or I'd say on the flip side, sometimes we, the young professional that, maybe is in their career that they know they're going to be in and they haven't gotten started. I think sometimes people, they get embarrassed.
Right.
And it's like, you are where you are,
Sure.
and the big thing is making that first step. It's kind of like when you decide you're finally going to go to the gym, right?
Right.
You've made that step to now make progress.
Exactly.
And so that I'd encourage, those different groups, like it's all about, taking that first step, taking that courage, doing the research, and trying to connect with someone that cares about your outcome.
Absolutely.
And I would add to that too, we always tell people that cash flow is at the center of every plan. Be a lifelong low income earner that lives below your means and puts a good portion of your paycheck into, your future. And you could have a great retirement. Or you can be a high income earner, not plan for your future and be spending, we talked earlier about paycheck to paycheck, you could be a high income earner that's in that same category.
Sure.
So it all comes down to kind of what you spend. And that's kind of how we build a plan around what do you spend, right? Because everyone's different.
Sure.
And I know we always talk about books. When one that Shawn loves is The Psychology of Money.
Okay.
And there's a new one by Morgan Housel, who's the author, is The Art of Spending Money.
Okay.
Which is a great read for anyone tuning into this.
Sure.
And for you.
Yeah.
But it's all about how, everybody spends money differently and we all view things differently. Like we always joke back and forth, like Lindsay and I love to mow our own lawn. Because we've got 2 young kids at home, and for us, I get to put my AirPods in and listen to a podcast or music for 45 minutes.
Sure.
Be outside, get some fresh air. Whereas, like Shawn's got kids constantly traveling for soccer, and they're constantly in and out of the house. Mowing the grass is not high on his priority list, or yours. And it's like it's like don't judge other people for what they want to spend their money.
Sure. No, absolutely. There's this is an older book. What's that? I don't even know the for sure title of it. Millionaire Next Door or whatever. And the guy walking into a car dealership in overalls, buying a car for cash versus the guy walking in with the suit, financing the whole thing, and there's so many perceptions out there. And I think that's even getting worse with social media, right?
For sure.
I think the younger generation, I'm glad I'm at the age I'm at, you can imagine growing up through this stuff and like looking at, oh, so-and-so's got that, and oh, so-and-so's got that, and but what do they own?
And I think that goes back to, my example earlier. When you have financial freedom to like say no to the job that you hate, like that's true wealth.
Sure, exactly.
True wealth isn't, I have $1 million or 2 million, whatever that number is.
Sure.
It's what it allows you to do.
So you were saying earlier, money is a vehicle or money is a
resource,
a tool.
Yeah.
And what what stewardship and what you do with it is a big difference. Big difference. Oh, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Because this happened to me as of recently, and I'm like, so we've got a new recruit. He's probably going to watch this video, and I won't say your name. And he started asking me questions. I'm like, these are awesome questions. AI.
Yeah.
So are you guys having, what have you guys witnessed in finance world? People calling you with questions? Are they AI and everything and then asking you?
So obviously AI is becoming more and more part of our life. The reality is, in the space that we operate on, there's only so many questions.
Yeah.
If you think about it, when we start to break down aspects of everyone's life, and there again, and that's why I try to tell Tyler too, there's really, you get long enough in this business and you're not really going to get a new question, really, to be honest,
Sure.
At some point. Yeah, I think, with the younger generation, I think they're obviously well connected with technology. I think they're trying to figure out, can they use some of these tools? Do they even need a person, right? A financial planner, advisor. And as we've talked about, I just believe, this is a relationship business. It's really good to stay the course when there's no disruptions, right?
Sure.
And unfortunately with the space that we operate in, the market goes down sometime,
Sure.
or we have, bad economy at some point. Or, unfortunately we're being flooded with news, and hopefully you're not watching too much news.
Oh,
but if you are,
yes.
I always laugh at I forget who it was, but it was one of the financial channels one time it was on. It's like, how to plan your portfolio for the weekend. And I'm like, why does that even matter? Like,
Right.
Maybe if you're day trading,
Right,
but
right.
that's not what we do.
Sure.
But, so it's just always trying to give perspective,
Sure.
and I think that's, so I do think the younger generation is definitely asking more questions,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really more tied to the aspect of technology. And even for us, and with EverSource, we definitely use technology, but I think there's always going to be the component of a person.
This is bringing up a good point to where actually we're sitting right now. So I told you guys a little bit about the move, and there's some stuff that people will know by the time they watch this. We're in the middle of a transition. We did 2020, as 2020 happened, we all, I can work remote. I can work remote. I can FaceTime with this teammate every day, and we can, figure this out, and we can, and it worked great for a little while, sure. But that relationship and that community and being able to touch, feel, see, have lunch with clients, not only, clients, sure. Team members, all those type of things. That's a big part of my recent move as well, is that we are getting back in the office, staff, team members, everything. And I think the world is seeing that same thing.
For sure.
And we're leaning back on the relationships, back on that trust relationship, that glue. Mm-hmm. So I think it's all encompassing. It's like what you're saying. And we in real estate, I'm already guessing you do the same thing. It's like, we don't need to work with thousands of strangers. We want to work with hundreds of friends. We know for sure that covers us by a long shot, and sure. And that's more important than making sure my billboard is here to the Mackinac Bridge. That type of stuff. Yeah, is there any other thing that you guys can think of that would be super helpful to somebody watching a video that has to do with finance? What are some misconceptions? Maybe if there's any misconceptions on finance?
I'll start with one.
Okay.
And it's interesting, and I'm going to call Mark out here. Because when we first started talking this morning when we met, he was asking about investments. And I would say, 20% of our business is investments. And people think that that's all we do. Even like when I go golfing with buddies and then meet their friends and stuff, they'll be like, oh, what's the hot stock? Or,
sure.
All people think you do is sit and look at a stock trading
day trading
all day.
And watch stuff.
I think that's probably for me, I feel like that's the biggest misconception. That's only 20% of what we do. Mm-hmm. The other 80% is the relationship and is building that trust, and is encouraging people to live their lives with meaning and purpose. And, it's at the end of the day, like we were talking, it's not about who dies with the most money.
Right.
It's how you use it along the way.
Sure. Absolutely.
So,
yeah. And I would kind of go along with what Tyler's saying too. It's, it's getting people to be comfortable, right? To have that peace, because again, a lot of times they're coming in with this misperception of what is the most important, and I'd say the other thing too is, people, and this isn't a recommendation, but people look at the stock market as kind of playing the market or gambling, and we don't do that. Mm-hmm. And again, we're not day traders. We've already talked about that. But there are ways to set things up that give you the freedom that you don't need to log in every day.
Sure.
Because the reality is, whatever you're worth, it's just a number. What is that number going to do for you? I think about, back in 2007, that was a peak of a market. I didn't get a flood of phone calls from people.
Talk about 08 or 09, start to shake a little.
Right? But I didn't get a flood of phone calls of people saying, Shawn, I've arrived. I have the most money I ever want. Life couldn't be better, right? And now we're multiples higher than that. And so it's just a number. And so I really would encourage people, get busy living life.
Sure.
Partner with the right professionals in all areas of your life, but get busy living life and really kind of tune out the noise. In today's world, and like we talk about, we were happy where we are. I don't really, envy my kids because they have so much more noise.
Yes.
We're so connected to these devices. And I love the opportunity when my kids, side note, when they get to go on trips and they can't bring their phones or they have to put their phones away.
Yes.
And now school, they have to
Did Camilla survive?
She did. And she actually left. Now she's misplacing her phone because she hasn't been so connected with it.
Good.
But the reality is, we talked about it. We care about the community. We care about making impact. And it's the same thing we want for our clients, because they're so much more important than talking about what stock do you own,
Yes.
Sure, there's a tool, there's an engine that you need to be moving you forward and making progress. But, it's not really material in terms of how are you going to use that resource, right? And the other thing I would say too, kind of along that lines is maybe a misperception is, just because you're successful in the industry that you're in doesn't necessarily equate to being successful
in life.
Right. And so,
or your finances.
Sure.
And I've come to the realization there's certain areas that I need help and I'm okay with that. And I think ultimately, you asked earlier, who do we typically work with? That's the people. We work with people that recognize look, I need help. I don't have time to do it. And I want to work with someone that, has my best interest and wants an ongoing relationship.
Sure.
So I think those are kind of things that, we try to help guide people. And like we talked earlier through this chat today, there's just other areas that we just think are just as important, if not sometimes more important. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You guys care about your clients, I can tell, as people, and you're going to give them, guidance along the way. And like I say, that is worth more than any dollar, right? The connection there and what we do with our lives is much more important than our bank account. Who we're impacting when we go out to have lunch, how are we being, and I always, talk to my wife, it's iron sharpens iron. It's not like, I'm out there trying to be the candle. I like being candled back. At the end of the day, if we're continue to do things like that, the rest of it just all works out. And it just happens to be that I sell real estate, and it just happens to be that you guys help with financial planning. But we get put in our purposes, and we stay as servants in those, and we just watch how things unfold and happen. So.
Maybe there's also a misconception that you have to struggle or sacrifice to the end of retirement, right? And then you get to retirement, then that's the good time, right?
Sure.
And too many times I've seen this happen, unfortunately, where you wait and then you retire and then something happens and then you missed out on the 10, the 20, the 30 years of building up to that.
Absolutely.
And so the other thing maybe this is a misconception, is there are different ways that you could actually enjoy the journey along the way. And I know we were talking a little bit off record about legacy, and I think that also ties into this too. You don't have to wait to the very end to give your kids legacy or your grandkids legacy. You could actually start legacy now.
Right.
And I think it's actually more impactful. We've been, that's kind of been the buzzword throughout our conversation today is, and so those are things we're looking at as we get to know clients, and we treat everyone unique because everyone's situation is different. We obviously have frameworks that we can walk them through, but it's, money as a tool, a resource. Can we, also inform the next generation, a generation after that, but then also can we make impact and legacy today? Because we're not given tomorrow. We don't
exactly.
know, And so I think that's also what we're passionate about too, is we want people to enjoy the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've had different high school friends and different people over the years where we've talked about that, right? one of the jokes, I don't know if you'll watch the end of it or watch this, but one of the jokes was like, if you ever get cancer or something, we're not even Harley people. We're getting Harley, like the movie. We're getting Harleys and we're, you know, but yeah, you don't.
Mark's buying a Harley this weekend.
You're not promised tomorrow, you know, and you start looking at your age and you're like, wow, 50, 51, you know, and you start, okay, what am I doing that I feel like I'm being purposeful? What am I doing that I feel like I need to adjust? You know, what, and to have guys like you to talk through that, you know, not just percentage, like what's my percentage that I made last year on that? You know, what is my, you know, those are all, you have to talk about them,
For sure.
you know, but more so, I heard you guys talking earlier with you were talking about a client, like hey, you're doing very well. What can you do with that, you know, while you're still around to impact community? And that's a pretty good financial advisor planner to say that, you know, and versus maybe even, hey, reinvest that over here, you know, and just looking at different, I know you guys think that way. You know, I mean, without even digging deep into it, I know you guys think that way. So that's key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, and I think too, along with that too, is just, you know, having someone that's willing to tell you what you need to hear. Not what you want, you know? And so, because, you know, we all have blind sides, right? You know, and I think when you allow, and that's not everyone, we don't let everyone in our life to speak truth, but, you know, there's a select few, right? But, you know, it's, you know,
social media, everybody talks.
Right, exactly, right? But I think that's also impactful because, you know, too many times I think in our business, the relationship could be skewed. It's like, you know, we're just taking an order to do something. And I'm like, well, back to what we've been talking about. We're not really impacting you if I'm just saying all the things you want to hear. You know, sometimes we do have to have those tough conversations like, yeah, you can't retire right now, or, you know, or you can, or, you know, whatever that might be. And I think that's important in this mix, you know, and I would think it'd be very similar in your business too.
I was actually thinking that as you said, real estate isn't walk through this door and say, I want a Rockford home for $500,000. I need to know what's going to help me serve you is I need to know, well, why, you know, do you have another baby on the way? You know, are you empty nester? You need to go from a different style house. You're for sure not going to need stairs. We want to get you into a ranch. And I always, you know, talk with my teammates and say, the more we learn about the client, the better we can serve them. And we can take a 6-month step down to a 3-month step. First of all, they have to somehow connect with you, you know, and then after they connect with you, you have to be a really good listener and you have to hear them out and hear everything they're and then ask the right questions, which you guys, you know, are talking about too, and then put a plan together and be able to adapt the plan as you go. We always joke about, you know, the perfect home is an 8 out of 10. You know, my math is perfect is 8 out of 10. You know?
Well, so, and I would add to that getting perspective, right? Because like you can have your blinders on. I mean, Mark helped us with our last house, and you could have your blinders on and be like, oh, this is the perfect house. But to get an outside perspective of, well, you're going to be pushing your budget and then, you know, the rest of your life. And do you need 6 bedrooms when you have 2 kids, or whatever it may be in the real estate world? You know, I feel like that is another way that we can impact people. Like we usually find that one of the spouses is kind of the head of the finance, right? Well, sometimes it's good for that couple to hear a different perspective than just the person that's in charge of the finances, because maybe they have a skewed opinion of, you know, how they're spending or how they're saving. Or if that person doesn't wake up tomorrow, you know, the other spouse then is left with, I don't know what to do with this. And that's another, you know, when we already have a relationship with that couple, that's where we can, you know, seamlessly make that transition easier, because we can help them with frameworks of how, you know, spending and saving and all that works.
Absolutely. Yeah, we purposely, my team in real estate, we make sure both spouses are in our group communication, you know, because it's, well, for one, it's just easier, right? Then that the husband or the wife doesn't need to go back and try to describe what Mark said and how we get the house ready and all that. But then you quickly, it's a level playing field too, when the husband wants a 4-stall garage and the wife wants this awesome kitchen. he's not going to get the 4-stall garage. He's not going to get the kitchen, but we'll find something in between, you know. And so I'd imagine there's some, you know, back to being good at customer service and having all of the people in that you're having the consult with. It's important, you know, be transparent. Like, hey, this is, you know, hey, I like to spend this amount per month, and I want to be able to do that the rest of my years. How can we set that up?
Yep.
You know, and well, Mark, maybe you shouldn't buy. No, you don't need a 10th bike, you know? Unless Tyler's at the bike shop. Then, all right, guys. So that was super good. I knew once we got talking that we were going to tap into a lot of different things. So. Yeah, these are the type of guys that you want to talk to about this stuff, guys. They genuinely care about what you're doing, not only just with your finances, but what you're doing with your life, and kind of helping you, you know, put some perspective in that. Not just I won't use a franchise name, but not just a franchise name that, you know, is looking at you as a number. So appreciate you coming out, spending some time.
Mark.
Yes, thanks, Shawn.
Appreciate
Yeah. We're gonna head over and grab some lunch. But if you have any more questions, comment below. We'll see you on the next one.